Growing up, I felt that people wanted to label me for all sort of things. And that was very annoying because I don't really fit in a specific box or specific label.
Hi everyone, we're back! Thanks to our new corporate sponsor, Molson Coors, we are here for season number 2 of Pride Talk, a podcast presented by Nat Pride. Our podcast features conversations with Asian American LGBTQ+ professionals and our allies. I'm your host, John Ong, and joining me as co-host for season number 2 is David Moore. For those of you that listened to season 1 of Pride Talk, you should know David pretty well by now, as he was the featured guest for our inaugural season. So David, welcome back, and why don't you let our listeners know what's in store for season 2?
Well, thanks, John, and it's good to be back with you. Well, I'm very excited for our listeners to get to know our featured guest this season, Dr. Kim Liu. Dr. Kim Liu is a multicultural and multilingual physician who specializes in mental health, women's health, and chronic and terminal illnesses using a holistic approach. She volunteers her time and expertise in Latin American countries. She's involved in multiple nonprofit organizations that promote arts and crafts in local communities and does outreach and educational programs into the LGBT communities, literacy programs for children of low-income families, and bringing the East and the West together by promoting cultural awareness and competency. And we are so very fortunate to have her here on the National Nat Pride leadership team.
Yes, we are. And just as we did with David in season 1, season 2 will be a series of discussions with Kim. Our goal here at Pride Talk is to have in-depth conversations with our guests and really get to know them, both personally and professionally, and to provide a space for the diverse voices of our Asian American LGBTQ+ community. What does it mean to be Asian? How do we navigate the world around us? How does our cultural and ethnic heritage influence how we love, play, and work? What we hide and what we reveal to family, friends, and coworkers? Join us as we embark on an intimate and fascinating conversations with Dr. Kim Liu. In this first episode of season 2, Kim discusses speaking multiple languages, her thoughts on labels, being different, discovering her sexuality, and why she felt she needed to hide that part of herself. So welcome, Kim. Thank you for joining me. And I also have in the studio with me is...
David.
Yes, David is back, but he's not answering questions this time.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. We're both we're co-hosts, so we're hosting this for the first time, like properly, since he was the one who was the person answering all the questions last time. This time, we're gonna do it together. We're gonna ask questions, and Kim is gonna tell us a little bit more about herself. So Kim, for people who may not know who you are or may not have met you at the convention this year, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Kim Liu. I am in NAP Miami and also helping NAP Pride. I was born in Dominican Republic, and I am very mixed. I am Taiwanese, Chinese, Japanese, Russian.
Oh,
and I grew up in Latin America.
Wow. Okay, wait, let that soak in first. Can you say that again? Can you say that again? I was like, okay, so you were born in the Dominican Republic.
Yes, I was born in Dominican Republic. I grew up all over Latin America, and I am Chinese, Japanese, Taiwanese, Russian.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
How cool though. How many languages do you speak?
I'm fluent in 4. But I do read more and understand more. So I'll say between 4 and 7.
Oh my goodness. Language genius. So what are the languages you speak?
I speak Chinese Mandarin, Spanish, English, and Japanese. And I do understand French, Italian, and I'm learning this language called Esperanto, which is a made-up language, but apparently a lot of people speak it. So that's really cool. But it's based on Latin roots.
I see, I see. So does it help when you probably grew up speaking many languages? Does it help to pick up
I
new
did.
language?
It does, especially because the languages I grew up with, they're so different from each other. So, for example, Mandarin is a tonal language. So in Spanish, you read it as it is, and English is completely different. So I think knowing so many different languages, it makes it easier to pick up. Knowing Spanish makes it easier for me to understand Portuguese or Italian. You know, they have the same root. And I think if I were to want to learn, let's say, Vietnamese or maybe Hindi, it wouldn't be too bad since I already know a tonal language. So, just have to try.
Cool.
Wow, that's amazing. So do you also read and write in those languages?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Hey,
Yes.
John, I think we have our translator for the website.
That's cool. That's cool. How did you start? Like, when did you start learning? So maybe go a little bit more specific about which part of your family is the Japanese part and which part is the
So
Taiwanese.
my mom is half Japanese and half Russian, but my grandfather, the Russian part, he was adopted when he as a child in China, so he speaks Chinese actually, Mandarin and dialect. I grew up speaking Mandarin and Japanese. My father is from Taiwan, so that's where the Mandarin comes from. So the first two languages I learned was Japanese and Mandarin. And since I was born in Dominican Republic, people speak Spanish. So in school, I spoke Spanish. English, I didn't learn until I was 5 or 6. But yeah, it was funny because when I was a child, I didn't know I was speaking different languages. I thought it was the same. And I would go to other people's homes. I would start mixing the words. And people would look at me like I was crazy. And I'm like, oh, you don't know what this is? And they're like, no, what language are you speaking? I'm like, I'm speaking Spanish. They're like, that's not Spanish.
That's
So it
pretty
was
cool,
funny.
though. That's pretty cool. What do you
Yeah.
do for a living?
What do I do for a living? So I'm a doctor for rental medicine. I specialize in chronic disorders and women's health and also psychology using a holistic approach. I also do actually translation.
Oh, of course,
I
yeah.
tutor and different business investments and that sort of things. Yeah.
So what's your hobby? What do you do for fun?
There's a lot. It depends on the day of the week and where I am. I do like to read a lot, but I also like to dance. I like to do horseback riding, archery, martial arts, arts and crafts,
My God.
traveling, eat. I like a lot of things.
So what do you think you're most passionate about?
Regarding hobbies
Yeah.
or in general?
Yeah. Like if you had to choose your favorite.
I would say traveling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
traveling and art would be the two main ones.
Take us with you.
Yes.
So you are part of the like the founding members of Net Pride. And
Yes.
I want to ask you, for the listeners, how do you self-identify in the LGBTQ plus community?
I don't like labels.
Yeah.
I am me, but I know people need to put you in a category. I would say I consider myself more pansexual. That's in the plus line. I love more the person who they are and not so much who they identify. Yes.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about labeling, because
Sure.
the community is LGBTQ plus, and it's already, there's label to it already. So, and we don't expect everybody to agree on labeling all the time.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit, since you have your own opinion about labeling. Tell us a little bit about that.
Growing up, I felt that people wanted to label me for all sort of things. And that was very annoying because I don't really fit in a specific box or specific label. Being of mixed heritage, people wanted to say, "Oh, you're Asian." And I'm like, okay, I'm Asian. But when I'm with Asian people, they're like, oh, no, you're foreigner. You're not Asian enough. I'm not white. I'm not yellow. I just felt like I didn't feel comfortable with labels. And yet people kept wanting to put a label. And I understand labels in a sense because people want to feel kinship and community and feeling that you belong. And that was a process to get to that point to realize I don't need a label to belong. But I can understand why people feel the need to do that, because there was a lot of us versus them type of situation, in all the different countries I grew up in. So, I understand why people need to label and makes things more organized, I think. But I don't agree with it.
Good. And also, and sometimes part of that is to like you said, kinship as well. It's like, I think role model is kind of important.
Yes.
Being able to see somebody. You don't have to necessarily have the label, but somebody who look like you, who is successful in their profession, in their lives, and that's good for the community as well. But
Yes.
like I said, some people want labels, some people do not want label. We respect what individual wants, right?
Yes. I respect people's different opinions and needs as long as everybody's respectful about it and don't try to impose on anyone and say my way is the right way, your way is the wrong, or vice versa. As long as everybody's respectful, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and also, because if you listen to my story, I talked about, when I was growing up, I didn't care for labels either because I just thought I was me. But what I found for me personally was when you start to identify, then you start finding those people that were part of that particular tribe.
Yes,
and that was very helpful for me. But yeah, I'm back at that place where just like you, I really don't want to be labeled one thing or the other.
Yes,
but I understand that there's parts of me that need to reach out to people that that can relate to certain things within my life.
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, at NAP convention, I said, I kind of stayed away from the Asian community for a while, but that's still part of me. And so I reached out to it, and that's why I'm part of NAP now. But it's just very interesting. Like, I love being able to belong to different groups. I, in a way, sometimes feel like I'm a chameleon. I can adapt and adjust because of how many different hats or labels I can be under,
Right.
But I learned to use it to my advantage. Instead of feeling confined by the labels, I'm using it in the sense of, okay, how can I help people that I can identify with and be okay that I'm not 100% that either. Exactly. And I realized the more globalized the world has become, the less simple the labels are. Now everybody's more is mixed or a combination of things. So I'm like, okay, I can use that and help the people, so everybody can become aware and not feel like, oh, I just am this one label. Yeah, so that worked now.
That's the great thing about the whole subject of intersectionality.
Yes,
and the fact that people like you and like me and others, we are kind of like the bridge that, connects different communities together.
Yes.
That's cool.
And that's what's great about what we're doing now.
And that's why we want to also get into personal conversations like what we're having now, is because then you get to express yourself. Because again, we cannot expect David or myself or you or Harris or anyone or Terry to represent the entire LGBTQ plus Asian community. We don't expect that, and so we don't need to represent the entire community because we are collectively individuals. So that's why it's important for us to hear personal stories.
Yes,
and so. Let's talk about your realization as you are growing up. When did you realize you are different from the very cookie cutter black and white male, female?
The first time I realized I was different than everybody else, I think I was 3. I remember I grew up in a small town in Dominican Republic, and there's not a lot of Asian people. I already look different, and so they start with that. I look different than everybody else in the little town that I'm from.
Yeah.
And then I realized that children would play, like females would play with themselves, males would play with themselves, and I didn't understand why. I wanted to play with both. I wanted to play with guys. I wanted to play with the girls. I didn't feel like, oh, only girls do this or only guys do this. And I also realized that I didn't think or react the same way as a lot of children. Kids used to be afraid or cry. Or I remember one very distinct conversation. There were some friends. I think I was at a friend's house for a sleepover. I think it was 3 or 4. I can't remember. And they were afraid of the dark. And I recall having a very grown-up conversation with my friends and saying, oh, there's nothing to be afraid of the dark. You know, everything is fine. You just have to turn on the light. See, there's nothing there. And recall her mom looking at me like I was crazy. And thinking like, interesting. What's wrong with this child? So that was the first time I realized, oh, I'm a little bit different. And, you know, the story about talking about different languages and not knowing that I wasn't speaking just one language. So that was different too. And in terms of my sexuality and being attracted to not just one gender, I would say maybe 7 or 8 years old, I felt a bit different. So yeah, different moments in life, different stages, I realized more and more about myself and how I don't fit into a cookie cutter description, like you say.
How was that like? I mean, how did you know that, okay, this is not the cookie cutter? I mean, it was clear for me, right? As a gay child, I knew because of how the society taught me and the environment taught me that I'm a boy. When I grew up, I'm supposed to be getting married with a woman, and I knew very early. This is John. I knew very early that is not something that I feel naturally doing. Like I feel almost like a little embarrassed and uncomfortable. So what was that like, realizing or discovering your own sexuality? Was there a struggle with the culture that you were in and all that?
For me, it was very confusing. The first time around, I felt a strong reaction to women. I think I was in 7th grade. And prior to 7th grade, I've always been in school where they're mostly male. And I wasn't really exposed to female of my age. So I never thought too much about it. You know, I thought, well, I felt comfortable with the males, but I didn't feel the need to have a boyfriend per se. You know, even I remember 6th grade, a lot of kids started talking about boys, and I just didn't feel anything like that. Then 7th grade comes along. It's a new country, new school, and there's a lot of females. And I recall being in PE class having to change, and I felt uncomfortable changing in front of all those girls. I'm like, why am I feeling uncomfortable? I don't care about changing in front of my guy friends, you know? So that was like the first, click in my head, like, this is interesting.
You said 7th grade? 7th grade?
Yes, 7th grade.
7th grade is what age? Like,
I was much younger than my peers. I think 12? I was 10 or 11 in 7th grade.
And you were in what country? You said you were in.
I was in Panama.
Panama, okay.
I was in Panama, and that was a Asian school. It was a school that was built by the Taiwanese government. So it's also the first time I'm exposed to a lot of Asians and a lot of girls. And so I recall being in PE class changing, I felt uncomfortable. And I try not to look at the girl because I start feeling a certain kind of way. I'm like, this is not okay. And I felt embarrassed and I felt bad. I felt like I'm doing something wrong. And so I would try to wait until everybody leaves to change, or change in in the bathroom instead of the change in the locker room. And I'll try not to look at anyone in the eye, or try not to look at anyone. It's just weird. But I think it was 7th grade when I realized, okay, something is different. Yeah.
So you felt different. How did you cope with that? How did you live through that?
I try to be friendly with people, and I was struggling, actually.
Yeah, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the struggle.
Do you think that other people felt that you were different? There's one thing, about you feeling different, but were you getting signals from other people that they were seeing you as different?
I recall a good friend of mine at a time, she would look at me weird. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, no, like I'm giving myself away somehow. I need to go under the radar. And I would start observing more how the other girls acted. And I tried to imitate them. And I felt really silly. I'm like, if I act like them, maybe they won't notice that I'm different. And maybe they won't treat me differently. But I was already different in the sense that I was a new girl in the school. These are the classmates, they've been together since first grade, so that's different on its own already. I'm the new person that came from another country that looks a little bit different, so like I wasn't sure if me feeling that I was being treated different was because of my sexuality or everything else. It was just so hard to tell. But I recall thinking, from PE classes, like, okay, I really need to act a certain way, or so that people don't know, because I've really felt bad. I felt like, why am I thinking these thoughts, or why am I feeling a certain kind of way? Like I didn't understand sexuality per se, and I felt very confused, and I didn't really have someone I could talk to about it. So I just tried to suppress that part of me.
Did you hear from anybody, family members or friends, about that feeling is bad, or is it just you just pick up naturally?
I didn't share about this feeling until I went to college, and I think I was 15. And I was in Taiwan, and I started noticing the girls a lot more again. And I recall thinking, I think I really like this girl, and I don't really know what's going on. And none of the guys pay attention to me. And then now there different girls are asking me out. I'm like, what is going on now? And I recall calling my brother. He's a year younger than me, and I called him and I asked him, and I expressed to him about my feelings, that I felt attracted to women, and I didn't know what it meant. At the time, I didn't have a word for lesbian. I didn't even know that. I'm familiar with the word gay, but not lesbian. So I didn't know. I was not exposed to that, I should say. And I remember talking to my brother, and my brother said, you're just going through a stage, and just be careful about how you say or how you present yourself, because that could go really wrong for you. And people know our family, and even though, yes, you're in a school that nobody knows you, but people know who you are. People know our family. And he would say, just keep a low profile, don't stand out, just don't get yourself in trouble. And that's what he told me. I think I was 15. And so I got kind of scared about it. And the first year, I just didn't think too much about it. And it wasn't until my second year in college, a really good friend of mine, she came out, and we were part of the volleyball team. She was graduating, and she came out to us in the graduation dinner. And it's like a bulb went off. I'm like, oh my God, I think that's what it is. And I reached out to her and started asking her questions about how it was for her. What does it mean? I was so confused. I had no one to talk to. And she introduced me to the LGBT community in the city where the school was. And she told me a bit about the different people and how the dynamics, how it is in Taiwan. But that was back in 2003, 2004. But it was the same message. You have to keep a low profile, never give your full name. You don't want people to trace you back to your family, that sort of thing. Because back then we used like a chat type of situation, but it was called BBS, like bulletin something. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. And there was that specific group, and everybody was self-introduced. And I remember writing my full name, and she's like, she deleted the post, and she said, you can never put your full name in something public like that. It's going to come back to your family, and then you're going to get in trouble, and they're going to get in trouble. So you have to keep a low profile. And that was the message I keep getting back then, in 2003 to 2004. That I have to hide that part of myself, that it was okay to be within the same group of people, but outside of that, it was not okay. So that was my experience then.
Wow, what a great introduction to Kim. Even for us who know her and have spent time with her, we have learned so much more about her through this discussion. We hope you too have been intrigued and will join us for more of this fascinating conversation. Share your comments with us about our conversation with Dr. Liu. You can email us at pridetalk@nap.org. You can even call us and leave us a voice comment. Our number is 4197-PRIDE-5. That's 4197-PRIDE 5. And of course, you can find all these information on the show notes as well as on our website, pride.nap.org.
And a quick shout out to NAP, the National Association of Asian American Professionals, which is a nonprofit organization that cultivates and empowers Asian and Pacific Islander leaders through leadership development, professional networking, and community service. Check them out at nap.org. That's NAAP.org. We also want to thank our corporate sponsor, Molson Coors, for their continued support of NAP Pride and this podcast, and for their commitment to fostering open and inclusive workplaces where all employees are valued, engaged, and inspired to be the best that they can be. Please join us for our next episode where Kim will share with us what it was like growing up in a family of diplomats representing Taiwan and how that added to the pressure of having to stay in the closet. Dr. Liu also shares her experience of attending a religious college with an honor code. Join us next time to find out if she really did sign that honor code.
Ooh, and until then, remember this, representation matters, so be seen, be heard, be loud, and be proud. Bye!
Bye!
The opinions expressed on Pride Talk are solely those of the host and guests and do not represent the views or opinions of our individual employers, NAP, or our sponsors.